Greetings YouTube. Today I'm going to review my latest book, Mud, a Military History by C.E. Wood. I finished this book yesterday while at the laundromat. Now I don't know how many of you have read any books that deal with military history, specifically ones written by people who have served in the military, though all military historians in general do to a degree have this trait. But there's a certain tone to a book that deals with military history. The closest I can come to it is the kind of tone that you hear in the voice of someone that's a rabid science fiction or comic fan when they're talking about something they love. There's this obsessive nature to it. There's this really geeky side. They get lost in it. They forget that not everyone around them, even if they're in a crowd of their friends, is going to be as into what they're talking about as they are. That is kind of what the tone this book presents you with. But it's wonderful. It's a book about mud, water, dirt, mixed up, that causes problems for people. They even have official definitions of mud, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is bottomless mud, mud that has a depth so deep that a vehicle does not touch bottom before it basically completely is unable to move at all. And type 2, which can be either wipe off potential mud that has a liquid content, or very hyper sticky mud, type 2A and 2B. Yes, there are people who've actually come up with type names for mud. This stuff makes me smile. The book covers Europe, America, and Asia. It really doesn't touch on Africa at all, because the references that the author is using are not from that continent. They're from the three continents, the three areas where I mentioned. But it's fascinating to see how something that we all think of as being so innocuous, so ubiquitous, and most people view as such a slight annoyance, and yet in reality it has changed the course of human history. Because it has meant that when you wanted to get someone somewhere, you couldn't. When you needed that unit of men to be at point A at an appointed time, and they weren't there because they're bogged down 5 miles back there and they can't move, that's important. That's a logistic nightmare for any person anywhere in any time period trying to figure out how they're going to win a battle. If your forces aren't where you need them, you lose. It's that simple. And this is just in the age before vehicles. This is contemporary. You're talking 2003. This book's talking about moving into Baghdad, or sections of Iraq, knowing that there were going to be spots that were going to be boggy. And they still lost half a unit of armor in this boggy, sewer-infested area that had took 4 hours to pull their buns out of that muck. And that's 4 hours where half that unit couldn't do its job. That's incredible. They're talking about how soldiers deal with it as an individual basis, how it affects their health because the bacteria live in mud, how it affects their morale, how it affects supplies, specifically how it affects the battles themselves. They talk about the fact that there have been people who have drowned in mud, have gotten stuck, horses have gotten stuck in this and become so exhausted they died. I know it's a strange book. The concept of a book based around nothing but mud is probably going to strike most people as very odd, and I have to agree with you. But it's still fascinating, particularly if you have any kind of attraction to military history, and I do. So I recommend this book. I don't know, I haven't even checked on Amazon to see if it's available. I'm assuming it is. But I bought it used, and I paid more for this book than I normally ever pay for a book. I paid $8 for this book. Just because I saw it on a bookshelf, and I'm just like, I must own a book whose title is Mud, a Military History. And so I did. And this will be going into my permanent collection, along with the other tightly focused books that I love so much. A book on mauve, a book on salt, a book on cod, a book on the history of bookcases, one on the history of screwdrivers, one on the history of the fork. These books fascinate me, and I enjoy them. But if you have any interest in military history, knowing about this very simple thing, this very innocuous substance, and how it's changed our history is fascinating.